So after another disappointing season for the Jacksonville Jaguars in 2021, the Jaguars hold the #1 overall pick for the second consecutive year, and the Jaguars have a lot of decisions to make, not only with their vacancy in the head coaching position, but also with general manager Trent Baalke. Will he be retained or will he be fired? I know we all saw the clown movement. I guess I participated in Week 18 at the Colts game, but also the Jaguars are going to have to make a big decision with the #1 overall pick. There's three guys that are the consensus to go in the top three picks in no particular order. Evan Neal, left tackle out of the Alabama Crimson Tide. Heisman finalist Aiden Hutchinson out of Michigan, and edge rusher out of Oregon, Kayvon Thibodeaux. The Jaguars could stay pat and draft one of these guys, or they could trade down. So I'm here to talk about what I would do if I was a competent Jaguars GM and who I would draft. So before we actually head into today's video, I'd like to give a huge shout out to FLTeams.com, who I'm partnered and affiliated with. If you guys haven't checked out FLTeams.com yet, we do sports articles and blogs on the daily regarding sports teams in the state of Florida from the professional and at the collegiate level. So if you guys would like to go check out FLTeams.com, I will link to them down below. Now before I actually get into the top three prospects, in which I already named off, if I was a competent Jaguars GM, I would trade down. Both poverty franchises up in New York, the Jets and the Giants, or East Rutherford, New Jersey, wherever the hell they are, I would trade down. They both hold two top 10 picks in this year's draft, and the Jaguars have a lot of holes to fill on offense and on defense, but the guys at the top three are elite, and I think that the Jaguars are probably going to stay put. I've never seen the Jaguars actually trade down in my lifetime in the first round, so I don't expect anything to change here. I think the Jaguars are going to hold on to that #1 overall pick. So let's talk about these top three prospects now. Now, the first guy I'm going to discuss is Evan Neal, left tackle out of Alabama, who actually made a transition from right tackle to left tackle. And we understand that guys coming out of Alabama, typically in the first round especially, these guys are well groomed and prepared for the NFL. Nick Saban does a phenomenal job grooming these guys, getting them ready for the NFL game, because that's basically an NFL organization at the collegiate level. And I think Evan Neal is a phenomenal left tackle. And the Jaguars, their recipe for success is keeping Trevor Lawrence upright and healthy. And Evan Neal can do just that. Now, his run blocking is really where he's best suited at. You've seen the physicality in which he possesses. He's 6'6", 360 pounds, but he is a dominant run blocker. Whether he's running through the zones or through the gaps, I've seen Evan Neal time and time again be able to actually outrun some of these defensive linemen and push them, creating these big gaps. And that's what the Jaguars desperately need with a guy like ETN and James Robinson when he comes back off of injury. The Jaguars need that in the run game. But when it comes to the passing game, Evan Neal definitely needs to get a little bit of work done. And I don't know if it's because of that transition that he had from right tackle to left tackle. Sometimes I've seen him get beat off the line, even though he has that quick first step and he's able to get guys into position. Sometimes he does get overmatched by the speed and agility of an edge rusher, and I've seen that time and time again. Or sometimes on these blitz counters, when these defensive linemen are running stunt routes or they're sending a nickel blitz, sometimes he doesn't know which blitz to pick up in these pass protections. So that is definitely something that the Jaguars are going to need to work on if they take Evan Neal. But I think Evan Neal is a phenomenal player. And all of these guys really are that I'm talking about in the top three. And keeping Trevor Lawrence upright is the most important key piece to this franchise. So that's why I talk about Evan Neal first. But now let's get into the two top edge rushers in Kayvon Thibodeaux and Aiden Hutchinson. So I'm going to kind of talk about these guys in the same breath. When I talk about Aiden Hutchinson, I think Aiden Hutchinson actually has a much lower ceiling, but a much higher floor than a guy like Kayvon Thibodeaux. Thibodeaux, I think off the rip, coming into the NFL, it's going to take him a little bit of adjusting to get to. I don't even think he's going to be all that productive and all that dominant in his first season in the NFL. Aiden Hutchinson is going to come into the NFL game and be a great player. I'm not saying he's going to be TJ Watt or Joey Bosa immediately, but we see premium edge rushers at the top of the draft every single year, and they work out. Now, you can get some value later in the draft in the second, third, fourth round when we see edge rushers coming out. You can get those values. But the best edge rushers in the NFL with guys like Myles Garrett, the Bosa brothers, the Watt brothers, those guys are taken at the top of the draft. Myles Garrett as well, who was a #1 overall pick. Thibodeaux is going to take some time to get used to. he relies in the Pac-12 on his speed and his athleticism to get off the line, and he's just bigger and stronger than everyone in the Pac-12. He was a #1 recruit coming into Oregon, and he's a great dominant player. But a Thibodeau in the NFL is going to have a rude awakening, and if he can learn to develop his game and not just purely rely on his athleticism and his speed, because he was able to overpower and outrun everybody in the Pac-12, once he gets to the NFL, it's not going to be exactly the same. If he can learn to adjust and get that game protected and right, he's going to be a phenomenal defensive end in the NFL for years and years to come and be a very dominant one. He's very good in the pass rush game. He knows exactly where to go and to shoot through the gaps to get to the quarterback, but also he's great setting the edge in the running game, and he has a high motor. It's something I've always noticed time and time again with him. He's relentless in his effort. Now with the guy like Aiden Hutchinson, there was a lot of criticism with him in that Georgia game because in the playoffs, he got absolutely outmatched by that dominant Georgia offensive line, and he was basically a no factor for a big majority of that game. Aiden Hutchinson, I do like with him coming into the NFL and being a lot more productive initially because of his finesse moves and his leadership qualities. Obviously, it still will take him some adjusting to get to in the NFL, but I think off the gate, he is purely a much better, finesse pass rusher than a guy like Thibodeau, who's more of a high motor, big power, explosive guy coming off the edge. Hutchinson's able to beat these guys off the edge. He's able to use his hand movement to push guys down and to set the edge as well. But you also see time and time again the leadership qualities with a guy like Aiden Hutchinson. He's making adjustments like he's like the will linebacker or whatnot, calling out defensive sets before the play call is snapped. Like, he's the one that's playing that linebacker role off the edge. Hutchinson, I think, is a very good player. He can be a great dominant player in this league to come for years. But now that I've talked about all three guys, let me actually talk about who I would take #1 overall. Now, if I'm the Jaguars, I take Kayvon Thibodeau #1 overall. You are not going to get an absolute dominant premium pass rusher like a Kayvon Thibodeau if he develops his game correctly and the Jaguars groom him correctly like this. You're not going to get an opportunity to get a guy like this. Now, Evan Neal, I would be okay if we took him #1 overall because I do want to protect Trevor Lawrence for the future, and I do think that this guy's going to be a phenomenal talent, but I just lean a little bit more Thibodeau. Thibodeau is going to take a little bit more time in the NFL to groom and get his game together, but him, if Chason can maybe get his stuff together and we can utilize him better, but Josh Allen off the edge, you get Thibodeau, maybe grab another defensive lineman in free agency. This Jags pass rush is going to be physical and dominant. We've seen the Jaguars pass rush, when they want to come out and play, be a great pass rush. We saw it versus the Indianapolis Colts in Week 18. We saw it versus the Buffalo Bills in Week 9 in that huge upset, Josh Allen crime. This Jaguars defense has so much potential from guys like Tyson Campbell, Shaq Griffin, maybe Kayvon Thibodeau, Josh Allen, Miles Jack, Damian Wilson had a nice year, Andre Sisco. If the Jaguars can keep building on this defense, we can have a very dominant defense in a year or two. Obviously, it's going to take some time to groom. We've got to spend some money in free agency. I lean Kayvon Thibodeau. I think this guy is phenomenal. I wouldn't be mad if we took Evan Neal #1 overall. Let me make that myself clear about that. But when it comes to Aiden Hutchinson, I don't want the Jaguars to take him #1 overall. I don't think he's #1 overall worthy. I think he's a phenomenal player, and he, like I said, will probably be the more productive player right out of the gate and probably the first season in the NFL, maybe in comparison to these other two guys, but the Jaguars really got some decisions to make. Whether they're going to let Cam Robinson go and let him walk in free agency, that's going to play a big deal. And whether the Jaguars draft Evan Neal. Speaking of free agency, I'll also be making a free agency video on guys I want the Jaguars to re-sign and let walk in these next couple of days, as well as some other Jaguars content that I got coming out with some head coaching updates as well. But that's basically it for this draft video. I want to hear your guys' thoughts down below. And as time gets closer to the draft, I'll make more draft videos on who I want the Jaguars to not just draft, later in the rounds, but some other possibilities and some other prospects that I want the Jaguars to get. So I want to hear your guys' thoughts down below. What do you guys want the Jaguars to do with the #1 overall pick? And if they do stand pat with the #1 pick, do you want them to get Neal, Thibodeau, or Hutchinson? I want to hear your thoughts down below. But if you guys stuck around for the whole video, thank you guys so much. And if you guys did enjoy the content, make sure you guys like, turn on notifications, and hit the subscribe bell to stay tuned for more NBA and Jacksonville Jaguars content that I do here on YouTube. But Brett James, aka BJ, I'm out, y'all. Peace.